So in my family, we have all of these various different connections. First and foremost, this is the foundation of Uncle Tom's Cabin that Harriet Beecher Stowe used as source material for her famous 19th century novel. And then her second book, The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, is the source material that Abraham Lincoln uses to draft the Emancipation Proclamation. So I'm thankful to have the type of parents that raised me and my siblings with having some sense of cultural competence and social justice by exposing us to not just our contributions to society as people of African descent here in America, but also our classical contributions to civilization as first world people, right? And to grow up with that sense of orientation, all of the things that I do to this day is simply because of that trajectory that they set me on 40 something years ago. I'm almost going to be 50, but 40 something years ago. So today is a very, very important and significant day in terms of acknowledging his family's journey and crossing right here in Freedom Park on October 28th, 1830, 194 years ago. And I encourage other people, learn the stories of your family and your ancestors. And I think that is one of the things that is part of the solution to a lot of the divisiveness that we oftentimes see amongst people. Because when you know the stories of your people, you begin to realize that we have much more in common than we have as differences. When you think about people of African descent who were brought here to this country as a part of the transatlantic trade of enslaved people, not all people of African descent arrived here on those ships. Some of us are indigenous to this land and have always been here. Some of us arrived here later on. But regardless of who you are as a human family member, everybody has a story of freedom. Everybody has a journey. Your journey may not be a part of the Underground Railroad. Your journey may be people of Jewish ancestry that came to this country or escaped from Germany or other different places. That may be your journey of freedom. You may be indigenous to this land, so you have a different story in terms of your people's journey to freedom. You may be Irish, and you immigrated here to this country, and your family also has a journey of freedom. They may not be the same journeys, but the common thread is that it's a journey of freedom. And I think the more we learn about the stories of our people, the more we'll be able to see the humanity that's common amongst all of us. But because many of us don't know those stories or don't know those journeys, it's easy for us to be able to look at each other as all different. And to think that some people have only had it difficult or more difficult than other people, or people want to play the oppression Olympics. Instead of being able to learn from one another in terms of this journey of freedom. And it's important for us to be able to find those stories. All of us have two parents. Whether you know them or not, or like them or not, or talk to them, all of us had to have two parents to be here. All of us. Which means we had to have 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 second-great-grandparents and 32 third-great-grandparents and 64 fourth-great-grandparents and 128 fifth-great-grandparents. We can keep going on to see that construction of not just our family tree, but also our roots. Because it took all of those people for us to even be here. All of them. All of them made decisions. All of them decided not to do certain things. All of them had certain failures and triumphs in their life. Some of them had different type of challenges that they didn't overcome. Some of them overcame certain type of challenges. All of them had stories. All of them had stories. Think about us not even knowing any of their stories and how they live. Think about one day you're going to be an ancestor. And people not knowing your story. Think about that. So knowing the stories and the journeys of the people that came before us give us a greater insight into who we are and what's possible. I think a lot of times people, especially who are religious, believe that miracles only happened 2,000 years ago. When in reality, you may have a grandparent that you don't talk to often that literally experienced a miracle. That was literally able to make a way out of something that seemed like there was no way possible to make this happen. But we don't even know her story or his story. We have great aunts or great uncles or other family members who have experienced miracles or who have been able to triumph over things and may have had challenges as well. And we don't know their stories. Sometimes our ancestors may have gone through such traumatic experiences where they don't even want to talk about what happened to them. So you still have to figure out a way how I could find those stories and how I can learn from them, because it gives you a greater sense of not only identity, but who you are and the potential of what you are capable of doing. When I've looked into my ancestry, I've found a number of public speakers. So it's no mystery why I do a lot of the things that I do. Educators, business owners, violinists, poets, writers, authors, lumberjacks, military officers, chefs. I've found all of those people in my family. All of those people. And it's a tragedy not to know the full spectrum of what is possible through learning those stories of our family when we don't investigate those things and we don't know where we came from or the type of challenges that our people encountered or things that they overcome and overcame. Those stories are important. Earlier today, so for the last 2 months, I volunteered to do an online course for elders who are a part of a senior living facility in Georgia. So every morning on Mondays, I've been teaching an online course to elders in Georgia about the same type of thing, history and cultural competence, asking them about their stories and their journeys, and they have an opportunity to share with me some of the things of their past and how it's insightful today. Like, that's something I volunteered and did for the last 2 months. And now I'm figuring out how to do another course with them maybe in the next couple of months or so. I just gotta manage my schedule to be able to do that. But these are the type of things that are impactful, that not only allow us to learn and to grow, but gives us the ability to pass that on to other people, especially our younger generation. So history is not just events that have happened in the past or dates on a calendar. History or his story or our story or the story, our stories of those that came before us, that gives us insight into why things are the way that they are today. And we could never minimize that. We could never take it for granted, because one day we are going to be the same people that our future generations look back towards. And I would want my future generations to tell my story about the things that I've done and the things that I'm doing right now, because I think that they're important in terms of enhancing the quality of life of our human family members. I would not want to be invisible. And that's one thing that I see oftentimes. There is this elder invisibility that many people just accept nowadays, where our elders are literally invisible. We don't ask them questions. We don't talk to them. We don't ask them for their insight into various different things. We don't ask them about certain challenges they had growing up, or how to actually overcome this or handle that situation over here. Every year that we've been on a planet is equal to one book in our reference library of life. So I'm going to have 50 books this January. And that's cool, right? But there's people around me that have 75 books, 80 books, 90 books. If you have members of your family that have 75, 80, 90 books, take time to talk to them. And I would even take it as far as say, record your conversations. Document what is being shared so that you have a record of these insights. It's a part of your reference library of life. And when you look at our younger generations, we need to be able to make that reference library of life accessible to them as well, so that they also have the opportunity to grow. Because literally, this world is going to be theirs. And we want to make sure that they have all of the resources and the insight necessary to bring more beauty into this world, as opposed to compounding the things that we see that are broken. There are many adults today that are only interested in what they can take. And most of what they're interested in taking, they can't physically take with them when they're no longer here. But they have that type of capitalistic and pillaging mentality and attitude towards not only the planet, but human family members. They're not interested in giving anything back or helping other people. So it's important for us to be those type of adults that we want our children to be when we leave this earth, and do our best to make sure that this earth is in the hands of people that we trust and we have confidence in, that's going to bring more beauty to this world, as opposed to keep compounding the things that we see are broken. So I just wanted to come on and share. Oh, I'm going to show you this too. I brought this with me. So this is an article that was published in my local newspaper in 1986, and it features my grandmother. It says, Falls Woman Ties Roots to Original Uncle Tom. And it tells you a little bit about my grandmother and her connection to Josiah Henson. So I'm telling her story at the same time. So I appreciate y'all for just tuning in and spending a little bit of time with me. But I just wanted to take a moment and share a little bit about my family, the importance of this day, and willfully encourage all of you to do more research and learn about your family. There's an excellent website that I encourage you to check out called FamilySearch.org. It's free. Ancestry is good. You have to pay for Ancestry.com in order to get certain type of records. But if you go to FamilySearch.org, you will find all kind of records about your family. As long as you have names of certain family members, a rough birth date or some significant date in their life, maybe a death date or a marriage date, a geographic location, that's just information that you would have to populate, and you will see all kind of records come up. Military records. I found military records of family members on the Canadian side. I also found that my grandmother, which is pretty dope, she is a Dorsey. That's her maiden name. And her parents' name was Joseph Dorsey and Edith Harper. Edith Harper's father and mother's name was Charles Harper and Harriet Harper. Charles Harper's parents' name was First Lady Margaret Harper and the Reverend James Harper. And the Reverend James Harper was the pastor of the British Methodist Episcopal Church, or the Salem Chapel, in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, which is a community that my grandmother actually grew up in, her and other members of her family. And at the time that Reverend James Harper was pastor of this chapel, Harriet Tubman was an attendant of that church, and she lived across the street in a boarding home. So my other third great grandfather, alongside Josiah Henson, was the pastor of Harriet Tubman. And I found all kinds of records. I found records of Josiah Henson and Reverend James Harper meeting at an African Methodist Episcopal Conference in July of 1842 in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I found those records. FamilySearch.org is an excellent resource to be able to find records about your family. You will find marriage certificates. You will find census records of who was living in a household during a certain time period, and even their ethnicity that is reflected in those census records. So, for example, Reverend James Harper and First Lady Margaret Harper, they were originally born in South Carolina, which I didn't even know until I found these records. And on those census records, they're both listed as mulatto. So it's been difficult being able to find who their parents were, because they were born during the times of slavery, and them and their children were classified as mulatto in terms of their racial background. So that's a whole nother path that I got to do research on to be able to understand a little bit more about that part of my family. But again, Josiah Henson is my third great grandfather. Reverend James Harper is my other third great grandfather. But I have 32, and all of us have 32 great grandparents. Those are just two of them. But again, it took two parents for all of us to be here. 4 grandparents, and you could keep going all the way back, and that becomes a construction of your roots as well as your family tree. And it's important to know who these people are, because that is evidence of who you are, because each one of those people, a part of who they are, makes you who you are. Not just because of the stories and the decisions that they made along their journeys, but in terms of DNA, you are literally a part of those that came before you. So I appreciate y'all for just taking the time to tune in. I had to share that today. Again, this is an important day for my family and others that share ancestry with Josiah Henson. And I wanted to show you where he crossed. So let me, I don't know if I could turn this around. Yeah, I can. Check it out. That's the Peace Bridge right there. And him and his family crossed these waters onto the Canadian side on this day 194 years ago. October 28th, 1830. Thank you, y'all. I appreciate y'all just tuning in and listening to what I had to share. And I'll talk to y'all again soon. Peace.